to give an interim assessment update. As part of our balanced assessment system that the board has supported us on in the last several years, going on 4 now, we've been working to build the balanced assessment system in alignment with a lot of the statutes in Colorado and also what we believe is best practice for students and staff in Douglas County. And there's been a lot of interest in this district assessment work. And so I'd like to introduce Matt and his team to give you an update on our interim assessment project. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you. Before I really get started, I want to introduce the 2 people that are with me. I have Deneen Jimerson, who's one of our data management specialists. She's going to walk through the process of the design of the interims and the process and procedures. That's really important because we did invite and we had involvement from teachers. And so it's really important to understand how that process works. We also have Sherry Bryant, who is a teacher on one of the design teams, who's actually going to go through one of the items that the team designed, and she's going to describe how that item works and how the scoring and all that process works. Before we get to that, I just want to provide basically the purpose behind what the interim assessment system is for our specific district. Really, these optional assessments are designed to guide instruction and really help us measure what matters most. We really want to tailor these assessments to what our needs are and to what our values are. And that really starts with a guaranteed and viable curriculum. We start with those core concepts and those core skills, and we want to design assessments that truly measure those. Because what we found is the assessments that are out in the market, although they assess portions of it, they don't really assess the whole thing that we really want, the things that we value. Our 4 C's, our world-class outcomes, we really want to design assessments that assess those. One of the things that we're also interested in is we want to have other measures of growth. We get measures of growth from the state on one assessment, but we'd like to have more opportunities to provide an overall body of evidence for student learning. Also, when it comes to relevance, we want to provide students with assessments where they really have to do some problem solving, and it's much more than just selecting an answer. It's where they have to devise a plan and they have to make decisions about what they're learning about, and they have to make those decisions based on the information that's provided. So it's really involving those higher order thinking skills. So the interim assessment part that we're on right now is really phase 3, which is, this is the performance part of the interim assessments. So when we look at this interim performance tasks, as we call them, these performance tasks are really multidisciplinary performance tasks, where when we developed them, we had cross-functional teams of teachers and also central office folks from different departments working on these to truly make these so they're not a math assessment, they're not an English assessment. They're assessing those large transferable skills that you use in everyday life. When we first started this process last spring, brought a team of teachers together and they started developing these items in the spring, and then we also field tested these items in the spring. Then over the summer, we took the information from those field tested items with the help of psychometrician, and we revised those. And the teachers who were scoring those also gave us some information about how to revise them for us to implement them this fall. Really, what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to a point where we keep developing items that are really these higher order thinking items where kids have to demonstrate their knowledge in things that we value. And we want to come up with a large volume of different tasks that they can choose from, so it's a library of different assessments that teachers have the option of using. So Deneen's going to go over some of the general specifications of the assessments themselves.
Thank you. So to take a step back, just really quick, I just want to point out one thing about the whole plan, the big picture plan of how these were developed. We had advice, we had recommendations from psychometricians, from expert test creators, I don't know what else to call them, from research. So we've used research-based evidence to support our planning and our thinking. It hasn't been, let's just create some questions and go with it. You know, it was very intentional. It was very process-oriented. It had a clear protocol the whole way through, from item development to scoring to revisions. So it's been a continuous cycle that, again, has been very closely monitored and revised, with the revisions and feedback process going on and statistical feedback to help improve the items to make sure that not only are we producing these tasks that are relevant and, measuring things that we care about, but that they're also statistically valid and reliable as we move forward, with the big goal of trying to have a learning progression that would span from kindergarten or even ECE all the way through 12th grade. So as we monitor kids along the way, we could say, wow, they started out here and now look at what they are. For example, one of the criteria that we are measuring with these tasks is idea generation. So we've established a progression of what does idea generation look like at a kindergarten level. Again, aligning that with world-class outcomes and 21st century, EDU 21st century rubrics and our world-class outcomes and everything, merged it together, all the way through 12th grade. So in addition to having this growth data, we'd also have the learning progression and expectations along the way that we would like to establish as a valid trend to look at how students are moving through these really big things that are kind of hard to measure, when you put it down that way. So we've based the interim performance tasks on the CWRA model, which is the College Work and Readiness Assessment that you probably are very familiar with. They consist of a performance task. So they give the task or the students a problem to solve. They give them a task library of resources that the students are asked to use to help solve the problem. So it's not assuming background knowledge. Everything is there that the students need to be able to solve the problem. It is interdisciplinary. There might be strengths in some. Some might be more science related. Some might be more social studies related, but there's still evidence of literary skills, of math as it applies. It's not forced. It's a real world problem. And each task, this is a challenge, is designed for the student to be able to accomplish in about an hour. So that's where it gets really tricky. But the idea being that they're given a role, the students are given a role. You are, a student that's on the advisory board for a plagiarism committee in the high school, and you're given a scenario. The teachers have come to you and asked you to review this student piece of work for plagiarism because, they're concerned with it. You're given the task of researching, given the task library, and presenting a conclusion or a solution or whatever the case may be. So all of that is tied into what the students are asked to do, while at the same time measuring some of these critical thinking skills, reading skills, writing skills, depending on the task. So that's a brief overview of how this has all developed over the last several years. I'm going to let Sherry take over now and talk more in depth about a specific example of an interim item that we've been using for the last spring and this fall.
Hi. As the former marketing teacher at Mountain Vista, I had the pleasure of working on this team, and I worked with Matt as well as with Jay Zimmerman, who is a social studies teacher at Legend High School. So first and foremost, I think this process is great in that you're bringing not only teachers who teach different things, but you're bringing teachers who teach in different areas, and we were able to collaborate quite a few times. I probably would not have come across Matt, in work that I did without us having this model. So I worked on the 11th grade assessment, and when we came together, we really tried to think of what is something that a junior in high school would be thinking about. And of course, being in the teacher role, you hear kids, man, I can't wait till I go to college, and moving out and getting my own apartment. So we took that mindset of what might be something that they could relate to and maybe have a little background knowledge. Maybe they have a sibling in college that lives in an apartment. And so we put to task for them the role of being an apartment leasing agent. And then we put together the task resource library, and we were quite creative. We used Nick Nolte's mugshot for the driver's license photo. And then we also used another photo of someone that would look very similar to them in Douglas County, and put that on a driver's license. We got pretty good at graphic design skills. Matt was amazing at creating a FICO score, which we knew that kids probably would not know what FICO score would mean, but having some numeracy, maybe a high number was something good, and using some background knowledge. And so we did that with our two candidates. Then we looked at some statistical data downtown Denver. We thought that it would be a good idea to look at more of the community colleges in downtown Denver. So we looked at the Breakers. It was a real apartment. And then we also looked at some data centered around, was it a safe neighborhood, the zip code, crime rates, and things like that. The red herring, though, was we really wanted to find out, would Douglas County students just make a quick call that Nick Nolte was not the dude that you would, want to rent the apartment to. When if you looked at all the actual detail, he was the better candidate of the other applicant. And they were placed in a scenario that they had done their due diligence with 3 other applicants for an apartment. There was only one apartment left, so there was some crucial decision making that they needed to do. And even though the other people were credit worthy, they had not been paying their rent on time. So their boss had told them, this is your last chance. If this person ends up, paying their rent late, you're going to be put on probation, possibly even fired. So there's that. There's a high stake that they need to make a well-rounded decision. And then the last component of really looking at their writing piece was they needed to draft an interoffice memo to their boss, giving the explanation as to why they were choosing that candidate. And I can tell you just from the process that we did, I found it a really enjoyable and engaging task. And then the great component that we did before we actually put this together is I asked some of my own juniors to come down to the Cantrell building on a Saturday on their own time. I think we gave them pizza. And we actually took Kaylee Kessel's thinking, and I recorded it on my iPad. And so as she was processing what she was thinking, she said aloud, I don't know what a FICO score is, but based on my background knowledge in math, I think 710 is probably a good number. And then she walked us through it. And it really helped us tweak some things in our assessment, which is always a great thing. I know I've done assessments and it sounded great in my mind, and then when I implemented it, it was like, wow, that didn't really assess what I wanted to. So from a teacher's perspective, I definitely think this really just ties into no matter whether our students are going into workforce readiness or they're moving on into a post-secondary educational experience. These are decisions that they'll be faced with, and what can they do, because many times they will have to think on their feet. So I just look forward to the district continuing to let us pursue this.
Thank you. So for the data, all right, my favorite part. When we start looking at the data for the fall and the spring, last spring and this fall, the assessment window hasn't closed yet. It's still open until October 31st, but here are just some rough numbers that we have so far. We're specifically interested in the interim performance task portion of this because this is really the direction that we want to go. We want to give these more authentic opportunities for students to learn. And in terms of budgeting and costs, this is last year versus this year. The last year representing what was actually spent, and this year is what we're budgeting for. We really want to expand the program. A key component of that is the teacher involvement. That idea of taking teachers and having them learn the process, develop the assessments, and also score the assessment serves multiple purposes. One, we get a great product. That it's going to give us a great assessment. We're going to get more assessment items. But two, which is a secondary benefit, is these teachers are learning. They're learning how to write their own assessments so they can implement not only in their class but also in their building. So building that capacity to also create these assessments, not only at the district level but also at the school level, is really important. For next steps, we want to continue to gather feedback, not only feedback from the professionals like the psychometricians, but we're also really interested in the teachers who are actually administering this test. What feedback do you have for us in terms of the requirements for the task, the time constraints of the task? What can we tweak to make this assessment item better? That way we can move to the next process, which is to revise them, to make them better. And then we want to continue to train more teachers and to develop more assessment items. The idea is when we create these assessment items using teachers, it's two things we get a benefit out of. We get a benefit out of creating a great test, but we also get the benefit of training our people to take this back to their building. It's kind of unique to follow up Pat with his idea of choice, but with choice, these buildings and these teachers have choice in terms of how they want to develop their own balanced assessment system. So if we give them the tools, they can create their own system to really measure what they value in the framework of our guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we're giving them that freedom, but that freedom comes with training. They need to be trained in order to do that well and to do it consistently. Any questions for me or
Director Silverthorne?
Thank you very much for your work on this. This really sounds fascinating. I know you guys have been enjoying yourselves. Who above age 25 doesn't remember how horrible Nick Nolte looked in his mugshot? So I did have a question regarding slide number 7, your costs. Thank you for breaking those out for us. I know that we talked previously about the total number of dollars paid to teachers for training and stipends and all that stuff was substantially larger than this. So can you talk about how this is obviously a subset of that, and how this contributes to the overall set of costs that you had laid out elsewhere?
Well, for this is just one particular opportunity for our teachers to get trained. This is strictly just for the interim assessment development itself. So, like you said, there are other opportunities for training, but this only represents that one portion of developing the assessments and training the teachers.
I just wanted to add, I think what you're referring to is we have lots of teachers serving in different roles, whether they're a doll, a qual, a daddle, a sill, a pill. We have all these different ones. Those are all real, by the way. And the teachers who serve in those roles as leaders, they're part of what we call the L&L team, the Learning and Leadership team for the building. And each one of those teachers earns a $1,500 stipend for 30 hours of work or more. And it's outside the regular day. And so when you bring all of those teacher leaders together and all the dollars paid out, it's substantially more than this, because this is just one little tiny project among the curriculum development, the professional development opportunities, and many other things happening in the district. So I think that's a great point to mention, that this is just a little slice.
And so you're overseeing the majority of that, the assessment. I just find this a mind-boggling task. So my hat is off to you. Thank you for doing that. That is incredible. Thank you very much.
All the rest of us, too.
Any other? On this side? Okay. You mentioned this is phase 3, the interim assessments, and I know we've talked that. Can you review again what phase 1 and 2 covered and how they dovetail into phase 3?
Yes.
Please do.
Since I've been here I've lived it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So phase 1, we initiated the interim development with a more of a crossbreed type interim or item development. So the questions were multiple choice, constructed response, more traditional in the sense. Now the reason for that initial phase, starting in that direction, was based on recommendations by the experts as well as in research. We were establishing a stable scale. So the intent, I talked about that learning progression earlier, where what does it look like at kindergarten, what does it look like at 8th grade, and so on. We identified and statistically validated a stable scale in reading and math for students using those initial phase 1 and phase 2 items that built that with the intent of, as we started the development of the performance task items, we needed something to hold on to it because there's not much out there in that world of performance task items to build that scale and to statistically validate a scale or a learning progression of what each thing that we're measuring looks like, at different developmental ages. Now, again, the other goal is that this would not be grade specific. So after we establish that scale, then, instead of identifying a student at second grade level or above second grade, that it would be a continuum of learning. So it would be adaptive to the student and where they are, and not necessarily labeling them by grade level. So we started out in phase 1 with reading and math and trying to build that stable scale. Phase 2, we added social studies and science. Again, the same thing, a combination of multiple choice and constructive response. Again, moving towards, pulling this all together into a solid assessment in the end. And then phase 3 was the introduction of the performance tasks. And as we move forward, again, the hope will be that we'll be able to pool the work we've done on phases 1 and 2 into 3 to build that progression and the way to identify student growth based on the student versus grade level or whatever else we might typically measure kids by.
So to be clear, they're a building block to lead you into the phase 3 development, and then even with these performance tasks, those other things aren't necessarily gone away. It's a continuum of all 3 phases in terms of the assessment.
Mm-hmm, correct. So all the time and money that we've spent in phases 1 and 2, they are leading towards this, as well as those items, now that we don't really need them anymore for our interims, we're putting them into an item bank that teachers can use for their formative assessments or whatnot. So they'll be available to teachers to use and tweak or whatever based on their needs of what they need to measure for their students.
So even when you're gathering questions that you might use in the phase 1 process, not every question's deemed, there's a winnowing process, right? There's some kind of filtering that says,
right,
these ones fit, these ones work, these can be improved, these ones are discarded. But the whole process isn't discarded, it's the progression that's being built.
Correct. So even those low-level questions that were concerned, with many people in the beginning, were intentional to help build that scale because we had to weed out how students fell in the continuum. And the only way to do that was based on Bloom's to try to present a wide range of items that were aligned to Bloom's taxonomy levels to help establish that progression, for the lack of a better word.
And I think what I'm getting to is I'm looking to the return on the development effort into that all those phases were necessary and important and even live on because they're still available, even if they were a stepping stone to the more robust assessment that's coming down with this new phase.
Yeah, that was the intention and the advice given to us, the recommendations based from the statisticians and the test development experts.
My next question would be then with, teachers, and you being a teacher and bringing that background, but even teachers who are presently in the classroom participating in this, and we develop these assessments, we now make these available. Is this a library a resource collection that's available then for any teacher to use? Do they have to use these, or can they use these as exemplars to develop their own in the classroom? And because that's come up from time to time in conversations I've had, is that, and especially in the context of state assessments with other things, and then are we just replacing that with our own battery of tests in the district, and yet the teachers value their own, or is this the intent to get this to be part of what's available to teachers to supplement, and they contribute, so it's not like their own interim assessments they develop are just in their own little silo. It's actually shared, or can be shared through this. Can they bring their items in and develop them through this process and then be a resource that's available to others in the district?
I would say in the future, yes. So we have the ability to vet items, so we could vet performance tasks moving forward, where if teachers wrote their own collaboratively or whatever, brought them in and put it through a vetting process, that we could establish some sort of validity and reliability, just to make sure that it was in line with everything that needed to be done. It's definitely a possibility. These are not intended to be secret by any ways. We are encouraging teachers to share the rubrics that are aligned. These are, since they're only an hour, they're a little different than the performance task work that's being done in addition to this work in our department. So performance tasks are a huge genre of types of items. So these are very specific and narrow compared to what a performance task could be or other forms of authentic assessment. These are intended to capture a quick amount of information to benchmark it in an hour which is really hard for critical thinking skills. So if for teachers to share what they look like, the expectations, to practice them, to share the rubrics, to share the scoring guides. There's all these pieces that are meant to be shared and to be a part of the learning process, not to be a surprise, which we've been used to, unfortunately, with state assessments, where that hasn't been shared and it's a surprise and you never get to see it afterwards. It's meant to be shared with students, to be shared with parents, to be a part of the learning process instead of a separate event is the intention. So that's the direction we're trying to go. The other piece I wanted to bring up really quick because that was a great point, is that because they're interdisciplinary, any teacher could use them depending on what their goals are. So if their goals are world-class, related, and you're using your content to measure creativity, then the student would only be taking one test versus, however many classes they have at the high school level. So that was another goal of the project.
And again, are we developing some tests that would then be, again, it could be interdisciplinary. So let's say at 8th grade level of thinking that we're expecting a certain number and that all students are going to take, or are these available materials that a teacher can then use to do that? Is it available. The former or the latter?
Latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks to Deneen, because she has been the project leader of this project for several years now and started out building that stable scale so that it could be a growth model, so that we could get away from just using one TCAP test for growth, and has worked with teachers like Sherry to make these authentic assessments. And the goal here was, I think this is an important piece too, from the beginning they were really concentrating on how could we give students one performance task, like was mentioned, that is applicable to multiple subjects and multiple skill sets, so that you're not taking one test for every single subject or one test for every different skill, that it's all integrated. And I think that the work that you guys have done has been incredible, and the collaboration with CWRE and Mark Chung, and so there's just been a lot of work done on this, and it's been work done by great teachers and making it really meaningful. So thank you to all of you. And Matt Reynolds, new System Performance Officer for the district, has hit the ground running on this project and many others. So thanks to all of you guys, really.